It's a perfect, beautiful day today, beginning of 2025. I come to this spot often to relax, to calm down, and to get more in touch with nature. And I've come here many times to consider some bigger decisions in my life. It's 2025 this year, and beginning of every year I start to reflect on the past year and start to think about the intentions that I want to be setting for the current year. And every January is like watching a play-by-play or a snapshot of the year before and starting to visualize the trailer of what is to come. And the reason why I wanted to come outside today and film is I typically am here just in my own thoughts, and I thought it would be a very interesting opportunity to share some of my reflections and to share some of my ideas for 2025. I think there's some construction going on just up here. Hopefully you don't hear it. The last 5 years has been a very interesting journey. I think where I'll start with the story is, first of all, I'm here in Vancouver, lovely city. One of my favorite parts of the city is coming down to the water, and I've actually been coming here for many years. Vancouver's home. It's a very beautiful place. Pretty expensive place to be as well, but a very beautiful place. Families here, good food. But it, for a while, had felt like it was a bit too small, or the day-to-day life was becoming too repetitive. And I went to school just over there at UBC. It's not too far from here. And throughout my entire education, I was here in Vancouver, and I did have the opportunity to go explore, go on exchanges while studying, to see what there is outside of this city. And I liked playing a lot of video games growing up, and after a while it felt like Vancouver was just that starting point in the hometown, and going out and adventuring, there was so much more in the world. So I had this curiosity to go explore earlier in my 20s and my late teens, and it was balanced with this need to stabilize and, of course, finish my education and get a job, to support a lifestyle, to be able to afford to live in Vancouver. And while studying at university, I studied business, and I studied accounting as well. It was a course that I took in high school. I enjoyed it. We played Monopoly, and we did all the bookkeeping and that on the computer. So it was a really fun. It was a really fun environment for me to be in studying. And at university, when I started to consider what I wanted to do in the long term, I saw accounting could be a very stable career path, and I pursued that. I studied it in university for about 4 years. I did another 3 years of further education to get my CPA, and I found myself in one of the big four accounting firms just over there. You can see downtown, somewhere over there, in around 2017. And in that time, I set my eyes on getting my professional designation, climbing up the corporate ladder, and I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be in my career. But I think as I started to get into the work, I realized that the work's actually quite tough. It was fairly normal and standard for people to be working long hours, and the pay also wasn't that great at the time. So, of course, I continued and followed my own expectation to finish my education and do the work. But something was feeling off, and this was about 4 or 5 years ago. Something was feeling off, and for the longest time, I wasn't able to pinpoint exactly what it was. I was doing the work, I was doing well, but something didn't feel right. I couldn't exactly pinpoint what it was. And when I started to reflect on it a bit more, I was a bit doubtful of my career path. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be doing the work that I was doing in accounting or in corporate forever. And many of the people that I was working with were also quite young. They were relatively new in their careers, contrasted with senior leadership that was in the field for many, many years, decades. So the work hours were challenging. The work itself was okay. It was challenging at times, but also a little bit mundane. But what happened was during my first busy season, and January around now is the busiest time of the year over there for tax preparation, year ends. I was preparing for my first busy season, and an unexpected event happened. One of my close relatives passed away unexpectedly, and I didn't know exactly how to grieve and how to process those experiences. I just remember the next day having to go to work, and I didn't tell anyone what happened. I just put my head down and started working, and I continued that way for the next several months, putting it under the rug and not addressing what I was feeling, and talking with my family, talking with anyone. I really kept it in. And it wasn't until our firm had an announcement that they had a mental health benefit, I think it was $1,500 at the time, that any employee could spend for therapy and counseling. And I thought at that time, perfect. I could get some therapy or counseling to better understand my career situation, because I'm feeling a bit stuck and lost. And I went to that session, first time going to therapy, and I started opening up, talking about my work, talking about what I like, what I don't like. And at the end of the conversation, I started to open up about my loss and some challenges that I face, and I realized this isn't about work. This is deeper. It's really about it's like an existential crisis that I was facing. I called it my quarter life crisis, where there was a significant loss in my life. I was starting to doubt myself, starting to doubt my career decision making, and I realized with my cousin that passed, it was something that was hidden. We didn't know too much about it, and it was a drug overdose. Fentanyl at the time. It's worse now, but fentanyl at the time was starting to take many people's lives. And when it was now someone that I knew, I was close with, that is not just a number in the news that we see. It's a real person, a loved one that was lost. I started to question my own mental well-being, my own use of drugs or alcohol. I started to really question, do I have control of my life? And all this came out in my first few sessions of therapy. And I found myself really lost and stuck. And I also came here at that time to reflect and to be here with my own thoughts, and learn that I was so uncomfortable being with my own thoughts. What I thought was a problem with my career and my decision making professionally, I realized this was really a personal journey. It was really a personal journey for me to better understand who I was, what motivated me, and how I could live a life that is not full of fear and doubts. And I started opening up more to those I loved and those I trusted about what I was feeling. And this was officially the start of my personal development journey. Meanwhile, I was still working in my auditing job. I was constantly busy. I passed my exams, and I learned to find ways to motivate myself doing the things that I like, which was connecting with people. I realized I was good at the numbers, but the numbers weren't that motivating to me. I really enjoyed mentoring and teaching and being around people and sharing ideas. And later realizing as I moved up in the firm, I really enjoyed teaching and coaching and training people beyond the work, but talking about who they are, their life progression, their career progression. And I started volunteering my time doing youth mentorship. I volunteered doing some work with youth with anxiety, university students, and I found myself very, very exhausted and busy constantly. I was working full time, a demanding job. I was volunteering. I was a treasurer of a board, and it all started to pile up and pile up and pile up. And I asked myself, what am I doing this for? I'm clearly not balanced. I have way too much on my plate, and I noticed that I was becoming more passive with my family, becoming more dismissive with my friends. I wasn't responding, and I realized that this is starting to spiral a little bit out of control. And on paper, I'm doing the things that I need to be doing. I'm working, I'm volunteering, I'm still keeping up with my fitness, but I started to lose connection with myself. I was way too overstretched. I was beginning to get burnt out. So I needed to recalibrate. I realized that if I wanted to do something more meaningful in my life, it ought to come from a place of my interests and my values. And I started to come to this realization that working in a career in accounting was not for me. And that was really challenging for me to accept because I spent so many years preparing for the exam, studying and working, and I developed a career path, a very steady career path that would pay me well, that would be stable, but it was in a way soul-sucking, and I didn't feel motivated in it. So when I went to the drawing boards, I considered what other things could I do? Could I apply for other jobs? Could I transfer within the firm? And I took any opportunity I could to transfer within the firm. I did a short summer working in the innovation center. I did 4 months doing fundraising for a nonprofit, and it was helpful. I did gain some perspective doing more meaning work, but the problem was it was always at the side of my desk, and it was second priority to my main career, which was in finance and accounting. So when I started to see this balance, I saw that 80% of my job was technical and analytical, and 20% of my job was more working with people and aligned with my values. And I had this really interesting conversation with my therapist, who's also a coach, about flipping that 80-20, doing 80% of my job that I like and 20% admin or more analytical. And I honestly didn't think that was possible. I had so many fears and doubts that I wouldn't be able to succeed in a different path. So what happened was I started to consider what would a real career path be if I were to do 80% of the stuff that I love. And I landed on a few things. Potentially would be starting a business, being a teacher, a professor, working at an incubator or a startup accelerator. I had ideas of being more involved with people and bigger challenges rather than just the challenges on people's books and finances. So when we put all this together, I started establishing an idea. And of course, with the idea, there has to be some actions. Without action, you're not really going to get anywhere. And I started doing research, volunteering more, and realized that, yes, this is a viable path. And honestly, it wasn't until the pandemic where there were a lot of changes in the work environment, where we were sent home. A lot of the work that I did enjoy doing ended up being taken away. That's like collaborating face-to-face with people. And I found myself number crunching late into the evening, like 1, 2 a.m. at times in my basement, in my pajamas. And for months on end, it wasn't the ideal way to be working. And it wasn't the ideal way to be living. And at that time, our firm started to make some announcements about some options for reduced work hours and time off because they needed to, reduce some of their costs. So at a certain point, I had these thoughts and ideas of it would be kind of ideal if I got let go. And it was in the moment, it was really driven by fear and anxiety. But at the same time, it was telling me there's something here that I need to pay attention to. And meanwhile, of course, I was doing all my self-development, my reading, my therapy, coaching, and I realized that if I want to make a change, I need to be the one making the change. I don't want to leave it up to my firm. And I decided during the pandemic that I wanted to make a career shift, so I looked into education. I identified a coaching program at UBC, so going back to school, that I could apply to. It would be fully online, and I could balance it while working. And I applied, I got accepted, I got references from my partners, and I made it clear that I was about to embark on a change. And when I finally decided to choose that path forward, I realized I wouldn't be able to do it while working in my previous role, especially during the timing, working many long hours, and part-time school wouldn't be feasible, so I decided to leave. And this is now, after about 3 years of contemplating my career, I finally made that decision to leave and do something for myself. Scariest step, because I feel like up until that point I was following the expectations of my parents, my peers, professors, colleagues. I needed to make a choice for myself. It was scary and empowering at the same time. And I gave my resignation letter. I said I'm no longer going to be here. I'm not going to be working as an accountant anymore. I'm moving on to pursue further education. And in that same time frame, I gave 2 weeks notice. About 10 days later or 5 days later, can't remember, HR called and the partners called and said, Casey, we want you to stay. We have an opportunity for you to do internal coaching and training with our junior staff. We're hiring a whole new cohort of students and staff that are going to be fully remote, and we would like your help. And I remember I was playing tennis when I took that call, and I was like, what do I do here? I just got so excited to leave my job and pursue this education and start this career path as a coach, and now they're asking me to go back to corporate. And I sat on it and didn't know. So I talked to my coach, and we landed on, well, this is my time to make a decision. But when I really started to dissect what was at stake, I decided to leave my job without any employment lined up, going back to school and start a business from scratch, high risk. And what's on the other side is go back to corporate, have a salary, get a promotion to a management role, and be able to balance the work and studies. And I realized that's lower risk. But it wasn't so much the risk that helped me make the decision, it was the impact. And my motivation was to help people. And if I started my own business, there was no one waiting for me to help them at that point. But there were about 100 staff that were looking for support immediately by the time they start. So I decided to take that opportunity. And in that time, I took about 3 months off, 10 weeks off, I think, to recharge, to recover from any of my exhaustion. I spent that summer playing music, biking, doing things I enjoyed, starting to build my coaching practice and approach. I found some clients to work with on a pro bono basis and realized that this is exactly where I want to be. I'm finally doing the work that I'm aligned with. And the job that I was called back to, I stayed for at a year. I managed the performance, development, training. I created mental health resources and groups, initiatives to help the firm and to help people through the pandemic. And I again found myself in a place of stretch. I was studying part-time, I was working full-time, I was still doing my volunteering, had my own personal life, and I realized that this isn't the right balance either. I love the work that I'm doing, but I don't feel like I'm getting compensated fairly. I was getting paid I wasn't getting paid a management salary, even though I was doing management work, which I found very interesting. And as much as I wanted to negotiate that, I wasn't able to negotiate that. They have all these rules. And I realized that I'm doing 80% of the job that I do like, which is the coaching and development, but 20% of it is now more administrative and honestly a bit of corporate politics. So when I reflected on this, I finally came to this decision that it's time to take that chance again and move on and start my own path. And the honestly, the trigger moment for that was I was on my bike, and I had a fall. It wasn't a serious fall, but I got scruffed up on my face. I have some scars on my wrist. Um, but I remember being in the hospital bed. I wasn't there overnight, but I was there for several hours, all beat up, bloody everywhere. And I was crying. I was like, what is this all for? If I were to go now, it was extreme, but if I were to go now, would I have lived a life that I was happy about? And the answer was almost. But there's still dreams and aspirations that I have to go travel, to start a family, to have a very strong impact on people around me. And I remember recovering, and I said, you know what, it's time to go. This personal injury of mine was a wake-up call for me to make that change. Now, all of this was happening back in 2021, about 4 years ago. And when I decided to make that change, I invested in more training. I learned how to do sales and marketing. I got a business coach, and I did it at the side of my desk for about 3 months before deciding to officially leave corporate and start my own life coaching and career coaching business. And I didn't know exactly where it would bring me, but I had 3 things that I had in mind. I wanted to do meaningful work. I wanted flexibility so I could travel, and I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to have the flexibility and the freedom to make my own decisions, be in control of my own risks and reward of my efforts. And since then, I haven't looked back. It's been 4 years now, and I've realized that I needed to go through that challenge. Not only the work and like feeling misaligned there, but to go through the personal hardship and a lot of the deep soul searching to better align myself with what I want and what I need to feel satisfied in life. And for many people, feeling satisfied may come in the form of having wealth or having resources, status. And for myself, I realized that what motivates me most is having connection and having real, authentic conversations with people and with myself. And now I've overcome the challenges, the traumas that I faced growing up through a lot of deep work, and I'm in a position now where I'm happy, I'm satisfied, but I'm still challenged. I still come to this beach to contemplate and question where am I heading in life and what do I want, because the world changes. We change as people, and I'm happy to say I've conquered and got through my quarter life crisis, but I'm still challenged to navigate through what we call this game of life. And ahead of me here, I'm wanting to further challenge myself to be more open and creative. I still find myself feeling stuck to my own psychological limitations, like, okay, Casey, you're working as a coach, so you'll only do coaching. Or, Casey, you've started your own business, don't rely on contracting work and only do it for yourself. Like all these limitations that I face, they're similar limitations that I faced when I was going through my initial transition, but today I still have challenges that I'm looking to overcome. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we don't need to be perfect. We don't need to have it all together. And at times we just need to take a chance on ourselves. The water's really starting to pick up here. It's kind of fitting. I feel like this is a good time to stop this conversation here. I thank you, by the way, if you made it to the end here, listening. But if I were to leave you with a few things, like listen to yourself, pay attention to what you have and be grateful for it, and pay attention to what you don't have and consider how you can get it, and if it's really truly meaningful and important for you. There's so much out there, and I'm here in Vancouver right now and living openly and exploring how to better relate to home. if you're looking for a change, if you're looking for something different, find that balance of change within yourself and the challenge away. And I'll be honest, I spent the last couple of years leaving Vancouver, looking for something different, just to realize that I have everything that I need and want here in this beautiful city. So thank you. I hope to see you in another video if I make another one, and enjoy.